What is momentum? Over the summer, hundreds of thousands of people were inspired by Jeremy Corbyn's call for a new kind of politics. That's what momentum is all about. Reaching out across all sections of the community to create a more democratic, equal and decent society. A democracy where we all participate. What can you do? Look out for your local momentum group. If there isn't one, get in touch and we'll help you set one up. Together, we can build a new kind of politics.
Now, in the last hour, the former Prime Minister Tony Blair has warned that if Jeremy Corbyn becomes the next Labour leader, the party could face annihilation.
Tony Blair is, of course, entitled to his opinion, but he should try and judge whether at this stage it's counterproductive.
Jeremy Corbyn, 251,000.
I announced to our conference that my first action in this new position as leader of the Labour Party would be to come to a demonstration in support of refugees, the right to asylum and the human needs of people all over the world.
And Mr Corbyn's outside with a lot of people shouting impotently.
Mr Corbyn is a person who, if you like, spent his background in protest movements, going to lots of demonstrations and so on. There is a culture of protest in the Labour Party. It's always been there, going back many decades, and it has its place. But government is different from protest.
But this is enormous, and it's probably the biggest vote for any leader since the end of the Second World War.
The moronic MPs who nominated Jeremy Corbyn to have a debate
it includes John Crudders,
need their heads felt. They need their heads felt. They should be ashamed of themselves.
Do you have any regrets about what you said last night or how you said it?
No, because I think when people in the Labour Party are infantile, self-indulgent or stupid, it should be called out for what it is.
With Jeremy, as I told him when I said I supported him coming in to improve the debate, by God, that certainly happened, didn't it?
Interestingly, there hasn't been sort of a great split in the Labour Party, that the centre and right hasn't fought back against Jeremy Corbyn at all. They've actually been completely sort of saying he won a majority, give him a chance to succeed.
And what he's really doing is alienating the Labour Party from the wider electorate, and what that really means is that he's moving us from being a mainstream political force to being something of a fringe group, an obscure fringe group on the edge of politics.
I do think that he represents a real strain in the party. He represents the party, or what used to be called Old Labour, or certainly the ideals that were to some extent swept away by Tony Blair.
We all want the same things in our party. We want a fairer, more equal Britain, but we cannot do that unless we meet people where they're at, translate our Labour values into a more modern setting, and ensure that they have confidence to vote for us, and they don't see it as a risk, but they see it as an opportunity in a way that we can prosper and build a more fair and equal Britain.
It's not that I think that Jeremy Corbyn's such a great thing, or that he'd be a great leader of the Labour Party, or that he'd be a great Prime Minister. It's that he does articulate some of the core values of the left.
Political parties are full of suicidally inclined activists,
Okay.
and clearly some of our members are suicidally inclined.
We've got to win back the millions of Labour voters who defected to UKIP and the SNP because we weren't radical enough.
Ed Balls refusing to condemn the Tories imposing a further weight on claiming benefits, a policy that benefits only loan sharks and food banks, prompting Labour's Simon Danczuk to respond, no, it will benefit taxpayers as well.
Well, there's no doubt about it that welfare has limitations. It has to have limitations. We have to build self-reliance amongst people. I think that is important. And what I think is also important is to say that we are where we are because this is what the government is doing. We come to 2015 and if we have a Labour government, this policy will be in place. What Owen does is speak about the benefits of being on benefits, and what I want to do is speak about the benefits of getting people into work.
No, I don't want people are dependent on benefits, like working people who are dependent on tax credits because their bosses aren't paying them properly, like the fact housing benefit is now up to £23 billion, subsidising landlords charging rip-off rents because successive governments, Labour included,
but this
didn't build housing.
No, you have an idealistic view of the world.
I don't have an idealistic view.
And the problem is, you sound like a 1980s alternative comedian.
I'll tell you what,
it's hilarious in many respects, but taking on the mantle of Ben Elton doesn't help anybody in real politics.
I'll tell you what you sound like. You sound like a Tory politician. And to paraphrase a famous Labour politician, the grotesque sight of a Labour MP scuttling around TV studios to back Tory attacks and some of the poorest people in society.
As part of their regime change project to separate Jeremy Corbyn from the Stop the War movement, to separate Jeremy Corbyn from Ken Livingstone, from John McDonnell, from Momentum, so that he'll cut his roots and cut the sinews of those of us who love him and wish him well, so that when they come for him, there's nobody left to protest.
It must be very hard not to look at the Middle East and say, hang on a minute, if we could wind the clock back, this was a grave mistake, and it was a mistake in which Mr. Blair was very, very heavily involved, the original invasion.
No, it wasn't a mistake to go into Iraq.
Can we come
people like John McTernan and all the old Blairites have got to come to terms with the fact.
Can we come to the domestic politics?
You made this worse. You served a leader who lied to us, and that was part of the terrible consequences that led to the killings on our street.
We're all paying the price of Iraq. The Labour Party has paid the price of Iraq. I'm determined that we'll learn that lesson, and we will not go to war on behalf of whatever capricious US president happens to be in office at that time. We won't go to war on the basis of a lie. We won't go to war knowing that one war leads to another, to another, to another. Instead, we'll go down the road of justice, peace and human rights, of sharing resources rather than fighting over resources.
I mean, Tony, talking about have a heart transplant if you were considering voting for a certain candidate.
Even Blair has forgotten, I think, what his original appeal really was. You know, he was an incredibly hopeful, optimistic, anything's possible person in 1997. And then when he intervened anti-Corbyn recently, he was a very kind of small, narrow, don't do that, it's too dangerous, very kind of risk-averse, very fear-agendered. And that, he never would have got in himself if he'd been like that 20 years ago.
Isn't it a fact that Turkey has been buying oil from ISIL? They used Turkish trucks to store it. They've been bombing the Kurds, and the Kurds are fighting ISIL. They shot down a Russian jet, even though Russia is wanting to fight ISIL. He has got an objective to get rid of Assad. A Russian ally has got the opposite objective. What a crazy war. Enemies to the right of us, enemies to the left of it. Keep out.
But my question about Trident is this, and this is the big issue. It's whether you spend another 30 billion on Trident when the hospitals want 30 billion.
It was a Labour government that helped to found the United Nations at the end of the Second World War. And why did we do so? Because we wanted the nations of the world working together to deal with threats to international peace and security.
And I finish with this. On October the 24th, 1945, and the former Prime Minister from Bexley Notes will remember it, the United Nations Charter was passed. And the words of that charter are etched into my mind and move me even as I think of them. We, the peoples of the United Nations, determined to save future generations, succeeding generations, from the scourge of war.
And what we know about fascists is that they need to be defeated. And it is why, as we have heard tonight, socialists and trade unionists and others joined the International Brigade in the 1930s to fight against Franco. It's why this entire House stood up against Hitler and Mussolini.
That's not the history I recall as it happens. The appeasers of Hitler and Mussolini were there in profusion on the Conservative benches, and many, many of them including some in the palace itself, look forward to a victory for Hitlerism. He prayed in aid the International Brigade as somehow being a Labour achievement. But Labour was against the International Brigades.
Obviously, the honourable gentleman has a difficulty reconciling the conscience of he and his colleagues who trooped through the lobbies shamefully.
Order. Can I say at the start of the Parliament that the convention that we don't clap in this chamber is very, very, very long established and widely respected, and it would be appreciated if members would show some respect for that convention. They'll get their speaking rights from this chair. Of that they can be assured. They will be respected, but I would invite them to show some respect for the traditions of this chamber of the House of Commons. It is now time for us to do our bit in Syria, and that is why I ask my colleagues to vote for this motion tonight.
You're embarking upon a path that will not be rosy, that will not be easy to tread upon, a path that will be mined and undermined by a toxic media campaign against this magnificent effort.
How can we use this event to have a massive pop at Jeremy Corbyn? He sang the national anthem, so they can't have a go at that. And he's pretty, I think, well dressed. They couldn't do the whole donkey jacket attack they did on Michael Foot. So instead, they focused their ire on the angle to which he bowed his head. What sad world do we live in where we're debating the extent to which he bowed his head? Instead of the other dignitaries who went out to some special lunch afterwards, he spent his time hanging out with World War II veterans and talking to them.
In April 2015, when I was in Washington, as part of the IMF spring meetings, I was warned by very high-standing officials of the United States government that I would be facing a character assassination attempt in Brussels and in Berlin. And I was even told when it would happen. That it would happen towards the end of April. And lo and behold, on the 24th of April, when there was the Riga, famous Eurogroup in Riga, it happened. There were tweets and there were reports in the European media, which then sipped into the Anglo-Saxon media as well, that were utterly inaccurate.
I used it in a collective way at a discussion, and you're trying to trivialise the whole issue of the Middle East. You're trying to trivialise the whole discussion about how you bring about a long-term peace process.
I'm very happy.
And you know that.
The British press is a very sophisticated political lobbying operation which masquerades as the free press, run by very politically motivated moguls who use their dominance of the media to get across certain political ideas and achieve political objectives.
This quote about Friends has surfaced, and that's what I was asking you about, and you've had your opportunity to...
Well, thanks for the tabloid journalism.
To answer. That's not tabloid journalism.
Yes, it is.
That's putting your own words back to you.
Tabloid journalism where you're evading, asking me to give an opportunity to discuss the wider issue of the Middle East. Because all you're interested in...
Actually, what I was going to ask you next was something rather more important. No,
it's tabloid journalism and you know it.
Well, it's absolutely not. I was asking you about your own words, and if you're not prepared to defend your own words, then that's fine.
I'm quite prepared to defend my own words. I've just done so.
Did the BBC orchestrate the live on-air resignation of Labour's shadow Foreign Affairs Minister Stephen Doughty? The broadcaster has come under fire after a blog post suggested as much and was then subsequently deleted.
If the press is a censoring organisation, tell me how that works. How can you know that I'm self-censoring? How can you know that journalists are
self-censoring? I'm sure you believe everything you're saying. But what I'm saying is if you believe something different, you wouldn't be sitting where you're sitting.
Oh,
I think a majority of Labour MPs think the leadership of the party is going from bad to worse. I readily accept that Jeremy was elected with a good and strong mandate within the Labour Party. There's no doubt about that. But his leadership is being tested on a daily basis. We have the Oldham by-election on Thursday. That will be a real test of his leadership.
If you look at the result of the Oldham by-election, it's stunning. I mean, a 7% increase in the Labour vote. If that had happened at the general election in May, we would have a Labour government. And this is after 11 weeks of unremitting hostility from the media, trying to demonise Jeremy as a terrorist sympathiser, incompetent, a threat to national security. And he's just had, I'm honest with you, the best result of amongst the two main parties in a by-election for years.
Do you think that you're at the stage of saying, actually, we need a new leader?
Well, I think the situation can't get any better. I think it's going from bad to worse on an almost daily basis. In September, she sent me some sexual texts, and I responded accordingly, and I shouldn't have responded. Wholly inappropriate.
The poor, the vulnerable, the weak deserve a political system that works for them and helps them. The rich, the powerful that benefit so much from our political system don't care what kind of name-calling goes on, providing their tax breaks go on. I've got news for them. We're offering something very, very different in this campaign.
OK, but on this case, sorry, I just didn't need to press you on this. It does look like, I mean, how many MPs have a relationship, a financial relationship with a photographic agency that is taking pictures of them and then receiving money from them?
Well, I've no idea.
There are going to be fewer supporters. We didn't lose
there.
the election this year because we were too left-wing. We went into that election saying we're basically going to be not quite as nasty as the Tories and take a little bit longer. That didn't inspire. Today, Jeremy's come out with, I mean, I think that the central issue, more investment to build a modern, high-tech, high-skilled economy. Both Thatcher, Blair and Cameron have all seen appallingly low levels of investment, and he's shown ways we can invest.
But what would your advice be to Corbyn? Because, I mean, compared to Syriza, Syriza looked quite competent and professional in its first few days, and Corbyn, as we know, and McDonnell and the rest of it. I mean, they are a minority in a large parliamentary party that, you know, without revealing too many secrets, hates their guts. So what should they do?
Desist from seeking answers in the past and escape straight into the technological future.
Go on.
Look, Harold Wilson in the 1960s, after the Gateskill era, which was the Tony Blair era of the time, Harold Wilson managed to revive the Labour Party by blending with the traditional Labour values from the 1920s onwards, an agenda for pushing Britain into the future in the white heat of technology, as he used to say. Whether he succeeded to do all this or not is another matter, but there were success stories, and he managed to capture the attention and inspire the nation, and many of us outside Britain. Corbyn has this opportunity. It will not be the white heat of technology, because this is environmentally improper. It should be the cool breeze of green technologies, of decentralizing technologies, of internet-based technologies. He has to combine his splendid idea of a people's QE with a QE that, as I was mentioning before, uses the power of the Bank of England to support a genuine state-funded investment drive into the new technologies, but to do it in a way that, yes, it funds large infrastructural programs, like, for instance, energy programs, but also at the same time provides venture capital to the young people.
Well, this is what they forget. I mean, I was demonised in exactly the same way Jeremy Corbyn was. I was expelled from the Labour Party. 3 years later, Tony Blair said, please come back and be our candidate. And this idea that Jeremy Corbyn's anti-business, that's nonsense. I mean, the left of the party, no, we want work for all our people. That means working with the business community, but making sure they pay their tax. We don't want it all like Google and Starbucks not paying their share.
Jeremy Corbyn, 251,000.